Microphone 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. 1 2 1 2 1 2. How's that?
Ms. Graham.
Mr. Giovanni, I forgot to ask you something before we left the interactive 3D scene. I understand you now have that back up on the screen for me. Another function that this interactive scene has, I'd like you to demonstrate to the chair the line of sight function, please.
So one of the features that we can do within the software platform is once we've created one of these line of sight characters, is I can double click on the character and it goes to his line of sight. This is taken at his eye position based on the height of the person that we put in when we created the character. So if we effectively said the person was 1.73 meters high, it would be around 5 centimeters below that to capture that person's eye height looking into the scene.
So this is an average line of sight.
Correct.
Thank you very much. And what we see here on the screen now is an image that's created from the line of sight of the blue character, male 1, which you'd shown us on Hayfield Road, near
Correct.
the roundabout with Henry Road.
I think just to add on top of that, this isn't to say that this is a human vision view. This is a reconstructive view of that eye position. And that's a very important clarification.
Thank you. And then I would like you, before we move on to slide 19, would it be possible now to show the overview which has been prepared?
So this is a digital animation through the 2021 data set. And we basically start with mapping of Kirkcaldy going into the area of interest.
And at this point, can you pause it, please, so that we can talk through this area? Thank you. And this has zoomed into an area in Kirkcaldy. And again, there's a red box that we can see on the left-hand side of the screen. And describe what we see there.
So the road over here is Aaron Crescent, and we highlighted that before on the first mapping slide that we talked about.
And again, can you highlight Temple Hall Avenue?
So the road, again, running to the left, east to west, or west to east, is Temple Hall Avenue.
And Henry Road?
Running north to south, just
And
running past the junctions.
Hayfield Road?
East to west, on the right side of that junction.
And where was Gallagher's pub?
Gallagher's pub is, again, oh,
I don't need that
Okay.
circled at this stage.
it's
thank you.
this building right here.
That building. Thank you very much. Please carry on playing the overview. And would you talk us through this as we go through the video,
Yes.
please?
So we've zoomed into the area of survey. What you see here is what we call a point cloud, which is basically it's the same model that you've seen before, but instead of being made what we call out of a mesh, which is edges and faces, it's made up of millions and millions of points. As you can see, it's a 3D representation of the scene, but it is an accurate 3D representation of the scene. And as previously explained, this all fits onto mapping, and it does so because of its accuracy. What we've now done is we've rotated round to Temple Hall Avenue, and we're just going to go into the junction. What you can see is there's a crossing, and this is the first sighting of a male in a white T-shirt that's referenced within the CCTV or the video footage. We're then going to go along to Henry Road, and we're going to go to the north end of that data set, and this is going to show the Shell petrol station. And again, we get a clip from the dash cam footage that you'll see later. We're now going to go down to Gallagher's Pub, so we're following down Henry Road, and here's Gallagher's Pub. As we rotate around Gallagher's Pub, you're going to see there's an extension to the car park side of it. This extension is where the CCTV camera was placed. that we can see the majority of the events within which occurred. I'm just going to take a view just behind that, just to give a general appreciation of what that camera would be looking into. Moving now onto Hayfield Road, we're going to show and highlight the area of the knife and the location of that. From the Snapchat footage, the area of restraint is highlighted, as you can see here, and it's near the crossing just across Hayfield Road. We have two properties which are significant because there are civilian witnesses that make observations from within those two buildings. And just highlighted here is the bus stop, which I'm sure you'll probably hear reference to specifically where police vehicles are parked and what happens around that area. Moving up, you can see Poplar Crescent on, just past that. You can see Poplar Crescent just to the side over here. And this is the furthest we see the person in the white t-shirt down Hayfield Road in the video footage. So it just gives you an overview of the scene in 3D. It relates it back to the mapping and gives you a general idea of what you can see.
And we're calling that the overview, the scene overview.
Yes.
Thank you. Could we go back now, please, to slide 19? And we were just about to come on to that. This is the second column of the work which you did for the inquiry.
Correct.
And then turn on to slide 20. And this is entitled Timing of Video, Audio and Objective Assessment.
So what we were trying to do here is assess the video and the audio, and we wanted to try and place this onto what we call as the real-time clock. The real-time clock is the time that people were working to at that time, which I believe was British summertime. So it would be an hour difference to Greenwich Mean Time. So that is the timing that we're trying to get all of the audio and all of the video aligned to exactly the same time. Out of all the information we had, some of the footage we were given very precise information as to the timing and how that related to the real time. And that included the Gallagher Public House footage, where officers went and they used a technique called the talking clock, to determine the difference between the camera time or the CCTV system time and the real time. The 999 and 101 calls and the airwave calls are all recorded accurately on the systems. We then have a series of Snapchat images or Snapchat videos that were captured on a mobile phone. We refer to these as partially timed events because we were given some information which allowed us to constrain the time at which these were applied, but we don't have their exact time. Lastly, we have what we've defined here as unknown timed event. Now, some of these cameras have got time codes upon them, but what we're saying here is we don't actually understand how that time code relates to the real time. We've got no reference whether they're fast or slow or by how much. And because of that, we put them in the unknown timed event.
So you were supplied with a number of different items, but all the times were different.
Correct. And that's because they all come from different systems, and each system has got its own digital clock, which is operating on a different time.
How did you resolve that conflict?
So if I move to the next slide, it was a matter of processing each video with the information I had available. We have over here the Harry Kohlberg dashcam footage. What makes this particularly interesting is between Harry and Robson, they make 2 phone calls to 999. Both are audible within the dashcam footage. What that allows us to do is time the dashcam footage to within a second of the real-time clock. So we're able to bring this footage from an unknown time into real time.
Is that because the 999 calls, you can accurately identify the time to within 1 second.
Correct.
Thank you.
We also decided to undertake a validation of the Gallagher's CCTV public house footage. Even though we were given officer statements as to the time difference and whether it was fast or slow, we wanted to validate it because this video for us was critical, and making sure that there were no human errors or mistakes in doing that process for us was really important. So what we took is a common point between the dash cam footage and the Gallagher's CCTV footage, and we used that as a time of comparison between the two. From that, we were able to independently verify that the police officers had conducted a good review of the CCTV and their timing was accurate to within tolerances that we could measure.
What was that common point?
So the common point we used was the braking and stopping of Harry Kohlberg's vehicle within the dashcam footage, which can also be seen in Gallagher's CCTV footage by his brake lights.
Now, I know we'll come to this later, but can you please indicate on the middle tile that we see where you were able to identify Harry Kohlberg's vehicle?
So we're looking at this area just here.
And that's from Gallagher's CCTV?
Correct.
And you cross-checked that with the dash cam footage
Yes.
to align the two
Correct. Yes. Temporarily. So by time.
by time. Carry on, please.
So we talked about the Snapchat footage having some constraints. With Snapchat, what happens is videos deleted within a certain period of sending them. So the videos that were originally captured were no longer present on Ashley Wise's phone when it was examined. However, the person examining the phone was able to retrieve what we call thumbnail cache data. Thumbnails are small files that are created after a video file or after a large image is generated, and its aim is basically to allow a computer system to understand a folder structure very clearly and show a visual representation back to the user. Because we know that this file was created after the creation of the video, it helps us understand an end constraint to when these videos could have occurred. So we understood that we had the last point at which these videos could occur, and we could start to work backwards from that position. Two of the videos occurred very soon. The thumbnails were generated very soon after the creation of the video. And we know this because there are common features between the Gallagher's pub footage and the Snapchat footage, which could only have occurred at those times. The other footage that wasn't that wasn't aligned within a few seconds, there were very, very clear differences in the number of police vehicles and the number of officers on the scene, that they were occurring at a significant time period before of about 2 to 3 minutes. So to analyze that information, we had to refer more back to exact common features between vehicles, police officer positions, and that allowed us then to locate and understand the location and the timing of that event as well.
So you were cross-checking each of those items with other information that you had?
Correct. And in each case, there was only ever one time that they would match. So it was very specific to when we could actually put them in the right temporal place.
Thank you.
The other unknown footage was there's a van driving through the vehicle, and Robson Kohlberg's iPhone footage. Both of these events occur and are very clearly visible within the dash cam footage. So we've got a very clear common events occurring between those two events and the dash cam footage to be able to align those as well. So what it meant is that all of these elements could be aligned and put together to the real-time clock.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next slide. This is slide 22. Tell us what we have here.
So we mentioned before a GPS data set, which is called ARLS. It stands for Automatic Resource Location System. It's part of the radio systems that are carried by police in the vehicles and on their handheld units. And what these units can do is, under certain conditions, they're able to store. And what you see here on the left-hand side is a CSV output or a spreadsheet type output of the data that gets stored. On the right-hand side is that information plotted out as a series of points. What was interesting about this that we felt we could utilize is the fact that we not only had the time and date, but we also had the latitude and the longitude of each of those points as they were captured for each of those units. What that allowed us to effectively do is create an animation of units as they move through the scene. There is some caution when doing this, and I need to explain to you the assumptions and the accuracies that we are working to. Firstly, the ARLS system uses GPS-1. In an exterior setting, that is up to 5 meters of accuracy. However, that can be significantly worse if the unit is either indoors or in heavily built-up areas. This is due to reflections of the unit, which would cause significant errors going into tens of meters or even higher. We also have to understand that every single time the GPS records a signal, it's like it happens in a millisecond. And that happens either every 5 minutes or every 200 meters that vehicle travels. In order to show this and visualize it, we've considered linear transit between the points. What that means is that what we're showing here is indicative movement of the vehicles from one position to another. It is not the exact position or location of a vehicle. What we do not know is if that vehicle or that person held still for half a minute, then walked across and then stopped for 3 minutes, and then it picked up that signal. We do not have that level of accuracy. The last thing to bear in mind is that several vehicles did not have ARLS working effectively in their vehicles at all, and several people did not have entries for their ARLS data at the start of the event. So it's just to understand that this is not a complete picture of every officer. It's the most complete picture we can do with the available evidence.
Two things. When you use the word unit, does that mean a vehicle or could it mean something else?
It could also refer to a person's handheld unit as well.
You're like a radio, a police
Correct.
radio. And you've created this. This is demonstrating where the data is and how it moves between 2 points.
Correct.
Thank you. Moving on to the next slide. This is slide 24. Tell us what we see here.
So the last element that we wanted to look at within this area is tracking of people and vehicles from the available footage that we had to us. So the most complete record of what can be seen is from the Gallagher's public house footage. What we wanted to do is, again, use that footage to understand this movement of when vehicles arrive and the movement of people within that scene. So we've taken the original footage, and very similar to what we did when we allocated the knife, we used the same technique to understand the location of Gallagher pub's footage and the camera position. We then carry out a process, and I want to just remind you that we picked out 3 elements from doing that analysis: the position, the orientation, and the lens distortion coefficients. What we're able to do is create a video where we remove those distortions. That's important because when we then start to model and we start to move vehicles within the scene, we can then start to understand that position more accurately without lens distortion affecting the analysis or the positioning. The things that we have to bear in mind with this analysis is the resolution of the CCTV from that footage is very low. It is not high quality footage. The other thing to bear in mind is we are observing people and vehicles at distance. We can say that the vehicle positions are accurate because we've done further analysis on the Snapchat footage, which is of higher quality and closer up. That allows us to position the vehicles to a high degree of accuracy. However, they only occur for short periods of time, so understanding people movement beyond the extent of the Snapchat footage is not possible. What I want people to bear in mind is that when we do position people within this scene, they are indicative only because of these effects and because of the tolerances that we're able to achieve with this data.
Thank you. Slide 25.
So here we see an animation and it shows a vehicle coming in. I'm just going to pause it here. We've represented all people within the scene as blue cylinders. The reason for this is because we're not trying to identify people within this. We cannot identify them from Gallagher's footage. The footage is not clear enough. But where we can understand a person's position and their movement, they are represented by a blue cylinder.
And can you show us that blue cylinder on the screen? Thank you.
I also want to reference this red zone here. Again, due to the quality of the Gallagher's pub footage, when there are multiple people in a very close proximity to each other, we cannot identify or differentiate between them. The number of pixels that we are able to pick or understand are just too low for us to be able to understand and actually determine floor positions and individual people movement. So in that area, specifically the area of restraint, we will not be identifying using the Gallagher's footage to understand people location. That does change very slightly for the Snapchat footage.
Thank you. And again on the screen we can see another blue dot or a blue cylinder, and that's indicative of a person moving.
Correct.
And another car has entered the scene from Henry Road.
Yes.
So this is an example of part of the reconstruction work that you have completed.
That is correct.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next slide, slide 26. And I think at this point you're going to demonstrate part of the evidence video timeline. And if we can stop there, do we see, oh sorry, can I ask you to go back slightly? We see that it's the evidence video timeline, video and audio assets positioned in real time. So this is cross-referenced with a real-time clock.
That is correct.
And it's from 7:09 in the morning to 7:41 and 28 seconds.
Yes.
And you've also noted quite properly that this is a shortened version which has been redacted for public display.
Correct.
Thank you. Carry on to the next part of this, please. Now this is a note, and I wonder if you could explain to the chair why this appears.
We want to make sure that when people are viewing this, they understand what they are seeing and why we've created it. What you're going to see is all of the audio and all of the video together on one screen at one time. What that means is, in order to show the areas that are critical, some of the videos have been cropped and zoomed into, so that we're only looking at the areas of action or of relevance to what we're looking to the incident. The other thing to bear in mind is several of the audio assets, specifically the 999 and 101 calls, overlap with each other. They don't happen one after another, they happen all at the same time. In order to understand or make sense of that, what we've done is at the start of each phone call, you'll hear the phone call played at full volume. After a few seconds, that volume will drop to a background noise and allow for a second phone call to come into play so you can understand the start of each phone call. You're not expected to understand what happens when multiple phone calls are being said at the same time. To do that, you can always refer to either the 999 transcript, which has been created, or you can refer to the individual audio assets that are available.
Well, let me just pause there for a moment, please. I wonder if now might be an opportunity to look at those 999 transcripts. There's a document which has been created in relation to those. Could we turn to that? So this is SBPI 00082-999 transcript. And tell us what we see on the screen.
So I believe the transcripts were done by PIRC, and they provided the text for each 999 call that came in, basically talking through what they can hear. And what we've added to this is using the real-time clock, effectively the start time. And if we go to the end of each conversation, you'll see an end time at which those conversations started and ended. And that's from when we hear that first phrase to when we hear that last phrase.
So can we look at the beginning, the first page, please? Do we see at the top it says Harry Kohlberg first call, and the time is given as 07:10 and 14 seconds.
That's correct.
So that's when that call started in the real time. And then towards the end of that call, can we look down and we see that goes on till 07:12:16.
Yes.
And then go on to the next one. That started at 07:10:16 and goes on to 07:10:45.
Yes.
And that's for Simon Rowe. So again, there's an overlap there.
Correct.
Thank you. I don't need you to go through that in any more detail. We'll be dealing with that later. So that's a separate item that is available. But in this footage which you've prepared, the enhanced video timeline, all the calls come into the footage at the real time that they were made.
Correct.
And that's why there's an overlap.
Yes.
Thank you. And then move on to the remainder of the note, please. Was there anything else that you wanted to add?
I think obviously we're creating a report which will be made available. I think we're just going through some legal redactions and making sure that it is suitable to be released into the public. As soon as that's been done, you know, again, when reviewing this footage, we have to take the consideration of the effort and what's been put in and the limitations of what we've produced, just as what we've discussed here in this forum.
So in addition to your evidence here today, there's going to be a report which, as I understand it, sets out in much more detail the evidence that you've given in relation to the slides today and
That's
the work
correct.
that you've done.
Yes.
Thank you. And that will be made available in due course.
Yes.
And just to confirm, Mr. De Giovanni, you have agreed to return to the inquiry and give further evidence if that's required towards the end of this hearing.
That is correct.
Thank you. Right, can we watch this excerpt of the footage, please? And if we start the screen, if you don't mind, and you could perhaps explain what we see on the screen at the outset.
So I'm just going to pause it here. So in the top right-hand corner, it says real time.
Left, I think.
In the top left-hand corner.
Your other right.
Yes, there's the real-time clock, and this is, as we've discussed already, the British Summer Time at that time of the event. Below that, you'll see there are 3 buttons. There's a 101 call, 999 calls, and airwave calls. These are effectively buttons that when a 999 or a 101 call or an airwave message is transmitted, they will light up. So it gives an idea or an indication when those are coming through. What you'll see below that, and we refer to these as tiles, effectively it's each video will come in as a tile that you can see. As you can see, this is labeled as PIRC 01293 dash cam footage.
So we can see at the bottom of that dash cam footage, it's the 3rd of May 2015, and the time given on that dash cam footage is 08:10 and 18 seconds, but through the work you've done, your real-time clock on the top left says it's 7 in the morning, 9 minutes past 7 and 1 second.
That's correct.
Thank you.
In order that we can transfer you to the right personal department, you now have the following 4 options. Please press 1 for lost property inquiries, 2 for custody inquiries, 3 if you know the name of the personal department, or stay on the line to speak to a service advisor.
Could we pause it there for a second, please? We see that on the left-hand side for the dashcam footage, it now says footage not available. Why is that?
When we reviewed the dashcam footage available, the basically for every minute of footage played, there was approximately a 10-second gap in the recording. One possible reason or explanation for this could be that the system was buffering and then trying to save the information before running or recording the next minute. But it was consistent throughout the footage and inconsistent in all versions of the dashcam footage that we were supplied with. So it certainly seems to be a limitation of the hardware that was used at the time.
And so at this stage, we can see that the 101 call button has been, it's lit up effectively. Yes. And on the right, we've seen the introduction of the CCTV from Gallagher's Pub.
Correct.
And this is all happening at 7:10 in the morning on the 3rd of May 2015 and 4 seconds.
Yes.
Thank you. Please carry on, please.
But what? Yeah.
Please, what's the address of your emergency?
Hi there. There's about a 6-foot black guy at Keyhole area, Shells. What was that, sorry? Keyhole.
Sorry, a black male with a blade, you saying a sword?
Around his road.
What time are we in?
Alright.
And what was he doing with it? Was he waving it about, or?
Cover
the whole of Scotland now, so I need to know what time you're in. Right, just take some details then from you.
What was it? What road?
The junction of Henry Road and Temple Hall Avenue.
Perfect, thank you. Henry Road and Temple Hall Avenue, right. So what's this black guy doing?
Police, what's the
Could we stop that there for a moment, please? So we see that on this screen at 7:11:02, the 999 call button is highlighted, and we also see that the reconstruction tile that you mentioned in the earlier slide has now appeared at the top of the screen. So this is showing three things: the dash cam, the CCTV, and the reconstruction tile from 7-Eleven.
That is correct.
Thank you. Carry on.
There's a black man walking along. He's on the Victoria Road. He's got a 9-inch strip in his hand.
Can you remember?
So you say Victoria Road, see?
Yes.
Just to explain that we've moved on slightly in the timeline. As I say, this is shortened, so it's not the entire product, which we'll go through later. So we've moved forwards just a couple of minutes.
Do we see the bus stop on the left-hand side?
Correct.
So this is Hayfield Road.
Yes.
And at this point, if we can pause there for a moment, 7:13:36, we see a further tile in the middle which says Robson Kohlberg's iPhone, and this is further footage, all from 7:13:36.
Correct.
Thank you.
And in the corner we've got the van driven by Witness Grey as well.
Thank you.
It's in front of the van. I see him. I'll put on the phone.
Might want to turn around soon. There's a car behind us, not.
Go that way.
Turn round now. Now. Just turn around that way. I think it's your dash cam will get as well. Alright, mate, that's fine. Just
go that way.
Oh, shit.
Right. Taking that Derek.
Again, we've moved forward in time now, and this is to the arrival of the first emergency service vehicles.
Inspector Stewart here, control room to the set attending. I'm monitoring this obviously from an ARV perspective. If you get sightings of the mail, you need to make an initial assessment yourself and feed back to me straight away, and I'll listen out on the channel.
Control for Bravo, do we have a description? I missed it. It's described as male, black, well-built, 6 foot tall, wearing a white t-shirt, dark coloured jeans and carrying a very large
And we
knife.
can see here at 7:20 the emergency status buttons have now are here, and we can see the red button for Peyton has lit.
Correct. Peyton's emergency button triggers at 7:20:42, I believe.
Thank you.
India 4, control keep off, that's somebody activated the emergency button.
And we can see the airwave, the green button lighting up, and we can see the reconstruction tile.
Control acknowledge, officer injured.
What's the locus? We've just got blue lights stopped. Jason Tagala, could you refer to? Thank you. Control Bravo, one officer's been punched in the back of the head, no obvious serious injuries, male secure on the ground. 30 seconds out, 4-1.
It's my fault. If you're alive, you didn't give me an update, please.
Papa, what do you want to worry? I'll just approach, I'll give you an update.
And if we stop it there, do we see on the right hand side this sections of the Snapchat footage, which was taken from Ashley Wisey's phone?
Yes, that's correct.
And you have a larger tile and an enhanced tile within that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Update, Will! And Justice Civil! Control. Control from 411.
We've got one fax message here on the 4, should control button.
Roger, the mail's on the ground at the moment. We've got several officers have taken a big restraint. We'll get back to you. However, we're going to need more control with less restraint, etc. But the time on the ground, well, there's no risk at the moment.
Yes, yes, did I get an update on an injury?
For 401, PC shot's been shot to the head. It's been upset. They need a ambulance here, check her over. No bleeding, no visible injury.
Yes, yes, just continue to stay safe and keep full control. Use all restraints necessary. Control, could you get an ambulance, please, for PC shot?
Henry Road.
And you've moved
Control.
on again to
Correct.
725.
Fallen Bravo.
Go ahead.
Roger, looking at an officer on the case today, unconscious, breathing, not responsive.
Terminal Sam.
Now can we see movement towards the roundabout, and we can also compare that to the reconstruction tile and see blue dots where that movement's being traced, indicative.
Correct, but there are 2 people in that area, so you can understand that there are 2 people roughly in that location.
Thank you.
Yeah, from the dock handle I'm heading from Edinburgh. This guy fully restrained is still requirement.
And again,
I've
we
got him
now
on the
see
video now.
Snapchat footage, the final Snapchat footage
Correct.
on the right-hand side.
Second
Oh,
Snapchat
second,
footage.
sorry.
This is just not your average.
Yeah, that's okay, thank you.
Control from Alpha 10.
Go ahead.
Just to explain as well, with the knife image, we were able to analyze the meta image from that photograph, and it gave us the time at which that photograph was taken. Again, that relates back to the real-time clock, so we know that at this point in time, this is when that photograph was captured.
And again, we can see on the reconstruction tile a blue dot, which
Yes.
signifies a person who's moved into that area.
I noticed on the call card it's got Seafield Road. It's actually Hayfield Road. H-A-Y, Hayfield.
Bayfield Road.
Yes, yes. Hotel Alpha Yankee.
Again, 7:28, we see more Snapchat footage. This is the final.
That's the final we have in our
The
presentation.
final
I believe Ashley did take some more photos later, but they were significantly later and outside of the key area that we were analysing.
Yeah, thank you.
Unit calling, go ahead.
Control from Papa 400, just give the Rangers that I'm going to take for the mail on the ground. I'm going to convey PT short to A&E shortness. It's just complaining about to the back of our head, so we'll get checked.
Roger.
And we've now moved on to 7:32, and this is coming towards the end of this excerpt.
Correct.
Go ahead.
Just for the call card, chest compressions commence, however, breaths have stopped due to cross-contamination, blood, etc.
Roger. ETA 2 minutes for the ambulance.
And the 40 days, Davidson.
Right.
Sammy, in the hand from both policemen around our units, do these roads, etc., closed up?
Especially at the moment, we're doing the road closure, ambulance is just approached. Locals is getting put in situ.
And can we perhaps stop there? What do we see on the reconstruction tile?
So we've represented the ambulance as effectively a yellow block We didn't have a make or model, and it just felt appropriate as us not to make those assumptions. So we just used effectively a yellow block of approximately the right size to show the movement of the ambulance into the scene.
Thank you. So I'm going to come back to the evidence video timeline in more detail later, but for the purposes of your slides, that was a series of excerpts of the footage you've prepared shown as part of the slideshow.
Yes.
Thank you. I will come back to that. I'd like to move on to slide 27, please. Tell us what we see here.
As I mentioned previously, the Snapchat footage is of a higher resolution than the Gallagher's pub footage. This allows us to place people and vehicles significantly more accurately than we can from the Gallagher public house footage. So what we're able to do is we're able to take the original image, which is on the left-hand side, and we carry out a process where we try to understand individuals within the scene, and that's that lower middle image. Just to bear in mind, and just that the image that we've actually analysed here for the individual people is at a slightly earlier time than the rest of the images, and this is because we felt that this is the best image of capturing and understanding each person's position at that time. But the position which we've analysed to understand the locations of people is the slide you see above it, and by carrying out that photogrammetric technique, we're able then to be able to place people back into the scene. I think what thing that I need to clarify is we see that there is a person in blue who appears to be near to the ground, and we can identify that person as an officer because of his high-vis jacket, which you can see in this footage. Again, a slightly different time, we'll show you that. But what we can't do is we identify there are 3 legs at the bottom or towards the right of that image. Because we can't understand or pick out pixel differences or pixel colors between those 3 legs, what we can't do from an objective point of view is exactly say whose legs belong to the officers and whose legs belong to the other person. It should also be noted that in this footage, we do not see the torso of Mr. Bayer. We do not see his head, his arms. So there's very, very limited information to be able to position and identify and say exactly what was going on.
So you've limited what we see on the far right tile to what you can observe from the information you have available to you in the Snapchat footage.
Yes.
So there are areas where you've not endeavoured to reconstruct something because you weren't trying to put your own interpretation on the scene.
Correct. We don't. Our job effectively stops when we can't see something, and it's not up for us to try and interpret that. We have to strip away all logic and just say what we're seeing in the scene.
And you've done that. So where we see gaps, it's really a matter for the chair.
Correct.
To interpret that. Thank you. Now, would this be a good moment to then move on to the enhanced Snapchat footage that you've prepared?
So, even though this footage so the snapshot from the first footage represents the highest quality footage that we have of the restraints. And we felt it was important to make it as clear as possible as we can. So we used a process called stabilization. It's where we take a point within the scene. In this case, it was probably, I think it was the wing mirror of the vehicle. And what we do is we track that position as best we can as the video progresses through. We then get the software to play that video back again, but keeping that pixel in the same place. We call that stabilization. It's used quite often in number plate analysis and those sort of techniques.
So this is a vehicle that's stopped. It's
Correct.
In a fixed position in the scene.
Yes. So this video is played at 100% speed, but then we now play it again at 25% speed.
And on the left-hand side, we can see the full shot of the original video, and on the right-hand side, you've indicated it's stabilised footage with a 400% zoom.
Correct.
So it's closer.
Yes.
Thank you. And the speed has been reduced to from 100% to 25%.
Correct.
Thank you. Then can we move on to slide 28, please? I think this is the third column of your work for the inquiry, which is in blue. And can you take us through this column of work?
So this is where we start to assess the statements, and the aim here is to try to understand what information we could take from all of the police and civilian statements that effectively allowed us to create a reconstruction. And we can break these down into 4 areas. The first one I think I mentioned right at the beginning is temporal, and these are information related by time or a timed event. Such as, for example, an emergency button being pressed. The next is spatial, and this relates to a location or relative position of the events of a person or an object. For example, this could be when somebody's talking about a road name as they're approaching a scene to say which direction they're coming from. Or it could be an observation of a person or a vehicle within the scene as well. The next one is the personal identification, which I think is fairly self-explanatory, but it is when somebody identifies another officer within the scene or a person within the scene. And lastly is object identification, and for things like that, we're talking about a location of a knife or potentially a location of a baton, and these are described within the police and the civilian reports.
Thank you. Moving on to slide 30.
So in order to understand the statements that were given to us, what we needed to be able to do is be able to place them against the real-time clock. When somebody writes out a statement, it's normally written in chronological order, but they don't have timings on them, apart from maybe a very one specific time, which I looked at my watch, I saw this time. Often it's just a chronological written of events without any differentiation between when these events occur. Quite often they're not even spread out in terms of spatially, in terms of timing, so it's not like you get a comment every 5 minutes. You could get a very detailed statement for 5 minutes, and then there could be a big gap between the next piece of relevant information. So what we wanted to be able to do is relate those statements back to the temporal information, which came from the objective video, evidence video timeline that we created. In order to do that, we firstly, in order to do that, we created a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet describes the audio and the visual information that you see within that video, and it describes it in comparison to the real-time clock. What we were able to do then is go through the public statements, and we're able to relate the public statements to what we can see physically in the scene. So for example, if somebody describes their car, their color, their make, we can then relate that to the video and pick out the point at which their vehicle enters and leaves the scene. With the police statements, it was much clearer to define and understand their evidence against the airwave events. Because they were obviously listening to the airwave at all times, it meant that quite often they were all aware of what was being said on the airwave and when it was being said. And that allowed us a good way, again, to spatially locate the police statements against the real-time clock.
And I will come back to this spreadsheet at the end. Can we move on to slide 31, please?
So the first stage is pretty much what we covered in the last slide, where we've taken all of those statements and we start to try to understand them in relation to the temporal events. Stage 2 is where we then start to identify within those statements and within those events the areas which can be reconstructed, again, by the parts we described, which is the spatial, the person, and the object identification. That allows us then to understand which areas can be reconstructed. We then gave all that information to the inquiry, and we asked for direction, and what we wanted to understand from them is which were the key areas of interest to the inquiry and which areas they felt there was agreement or dispute between the various statements. And stage 4, I'm just going to move to the next slide because it explains
Thank
it a little
you.
bit clearer.
So this will be 32.
So what we have here is effectively a series of events following the real-time clock, and we had many areas where there are agreement, and that's not just agreement between police statements, but that's also agreement between police and public statements. However, there are occasions where there would be disagreement or dispute, where multiple versions wouldn't coincide with each other. And these were obviously sort of narrowed down and then reflected back to us as the ones that the inquiry would like to understand in more detail.
And then slide 33.
I think it's important to say that when we talk about a reconstruction, we're not talking about a Pixar animation. We're not talking about anything in that level of detail. What we're looking at is a way of helping and assisting the inquiry. It is a tool to help get the best evidence and achieve the best evidence with the witnesses that you have coming here. With that in mind, the first area that we've been asked to help with is the alleged stump. And what we'd like to provide there is the interactive 3D scene as you have seen it demonstrated today. It would be presented as you see it here. So we would have the vehicles as they were at the time, and that includes the police vehicles. However, what we will not be doing before a witness gives their evidence is positioning people within the scene. We would hope that it would be allowed, we would allow the witnesses to place themselves within the scene and use their own memory and judgment as to where they were. We can then replicate that once they've done that within this 3D view and understand where they believe their best positions of people, of where they were and where people that they saw were. And we can actually look at that from any point of view. So for example, we can take it from a window position or we can take it from a ground position.
And you're going to be able to assist the inquiry with placing people in the scene.
Correct.
Once the evidence has been laid.
Yes.
Thank you.
The second event that was highlighted as an area of interest to us, or of an interest to the inquiry, please apologise, is the restraint position. For this, we would not be using the 3D full interactive reconstruction, but instead we would be using a series of stills. Those stills will allow a user to be able to mark up, similar that you've seen me do on the map. They'll use the same technology, and they'll be able to start to mark up lines and circles as to where things happened, and they'll be given verbal descriptions of what happened in those areas. So the types of stills that you'll see would be, for example, the two that you see here, where there is there are no people placed within the scene. We're also going to produce two images where we're going to place Mr. Bayo in the scene based on the second Snapchat footage where his torso and his legs are visible. And we'll be placing his position based on that Snapchat footage and that position. So it's an accurate objective assessment to his location. The last images that we would provide are the ones that we've been able to produce from the first Snapchat footage, which is the location of the officers around the time of the first Snapchat footage. The aim of this will we'll also provide some of these slides which will have distances to allow the chair and the inquiry to understand those distances that are involved from different viewpoints.
So you've described how we will be able to use within the hearings the interactive 3D scene in relation to the alleged stomp, as you put it, but not to use that interactive 3D scene in relation to the restraint other than in the use of stills. Can you explain to the chair why the interactive 3D scene is not suitable for the restraint moment?
The difference between the two is when we're looking at the stomp, we're looking at a very, very small period of time. It could be a fraction of a second or a second at most. When we're looking at the restraint, we're looking at over a much longer period of time, We're looking at it with many more people and significant different angles. It's significantly more complex. The reason we don't want to use the 3D view for that analysis is because we think it'll be simpler for people to engage on that platform for more people. However, when we're using the real-time interactive scenario for a single point in time, we feel that will help people understand and place themselves better because we can take their line of sight and we can ask them to corroborate whether they're happy that that represented their view, and if not, they can correct it. So we can actually give a little bit more information, a little bit of feedback to that specific point in time, as opposed to something that's stretched over several seconds or several minutes.
Thank you. What I would like to do now is to move on to look at the spreadsheet and the video timeline. I understand that you would like a few moments just to move from one technology to another, and I wonder, Chair, if that would be possible just for a few moments to allow Mr. Di Giovanni just to now change his system.
About 5 minutes. Yes, Ms. Graham.
Before I turn to the spreadsheet, Mr. De Giovanni, could we just go back again to explain why we're not using the interactive 3D scene, other than using stills, but why we're not using that for the restraint? What would the difficulties be in trying to use that interactive scene for the restraint?
So as I've explained in the first part, one of the issues is that obviously it happens over a longer period of time, and there could be multiple positions that Mr. Bayo is in multiple orientations. But the other issue is about the way people will describe themselves, how they're positioning their arms, how they're maybe how they're holding Mr. Bayo, how and what position he's in. And what we're not able to do in real time is manipulate arms, legs, poses. We can't operate that quickly. What that would mean is if we were trying to do that kind of work in real time, when somebody's giving their evidence, it would basically hold the inquiry up. So we're trying to find the most efficient way in which the evidence can be taken, and then if there is enough evidence after that, potentially we could then reconstruct that back into a 3D scene in a slower time back in our offices. So it isn't that we don't want to. It's just us being very conscious of the people's time that you're bringing in here and the time it would take to manipulate the scene to the effect of showing that level of detail.
Thank you very much. Could we turn now, please, to the spreadsheet? I should say that there has been a copy provided for you, Chair, and for both assessors. There are also hard copies provided on every seat for anyone who's in the hearing room who wishes to follow the next passage of evidence. Could I ask, however, that those hard copies are returned to the inquiry team before people leave today? In terms of the legal representatives of the core participants, they not only have copies available, but they have access on our digital system to the spreadsheet. Thank you. Let's look for now at the spreadsheet itself. And as we go through this, Mr. De Giovanni, I'd like to start playing parts of the enhanced video timeline. And what I understand is we're going to bring the enhanced video timeline onto the screen now, Ms. Wildgoose, if we may. And if we could stop that there. And we'll see that, as we've seen earlier, the real-time clock is again on the top left-hand side. The buttons for the calls and the airwaves are also just under there. And we're beginning with the dashcam footage from Harry Kohlberg's vehicle. And I'm going to, as we go through this footage, if I may, I'd like to break it down into 7 phases to try and gather relevant parts together. So the first phase will be from the beginning of the footage to 7:15 and 55 seconds. So we will play this through once from 7:09:20 to 7:15:55, and this section we will show. We will hear the 999 calls that we heard earlier. And can I also just, before we begin, can I point out that this is on the spreadsheet, we can see the times in the left-hand column. So this is what you said in your slides earlier. The video timings are in the first column, and we're going to play from the beginning down to 7:15 and 55, where people can see that on the spreadsheet. So it's on page 1 of the spreadsheet. We then see a column 3 in called Caller ID Airwave Transcription. And at the bottom of that page, we can see some entries there. An airwave, at 7:16:29, PC Ashley Tomlinson. And Con 1, which is the control room airwave.
Yes.
And then the next column is Event Airwave Transcription. And do we see there a transcription of what people are likely to hear on the airwave on the footage?
That is correct.
And then in the next column along, it's called Description of Visible Events in the Video. tell us about this column?
So over here, what you have is it's basically a benign description of what we can see in the video footage available to us. We've tried to remove as much interpretation as possible, so it is a minimal amount of subjective interpretation of what we're seeing. And it's mainly to try and relate events that we can see in the video specifically to the timeline, and that's the reason we generated this in the first place. You should also note that there are several entries in here that haven't just been created by ALI, but they've been created by the inquiry team as well. And it's effectively a combined effort to produce this spreadsheet to be the most faithful version of written version of the events that we see in the video.
Thank you. And again, in terms of cross-checking things, if we look at the first entry in the spreadsheet, which is at 7:09:20 to 7:09:33, we see the description of visible events, and it talks about a figure seen walking. And then in the final column, it gives a reference number, and it refers to dash cam footage. What's in the final column?
So when we're making observations within the evidence video timeline, there could be multiple tiles or multiple videos open at any specific time. So what we want to be clear about is when an observation is being made as to which tile that observation is being made in. So for example, if something is being seen in the Gallagher pub footage, then everybody knows that is where we are making that observation from.
So the first three entries in the spreadsheet, so under the description of visible events, those first three entries are a description of what can be seen in the dash cam footage and the footage from Robson Kohlberg's iPhone.
That is correct.
So as we're watching this footage in real time, if people want to focus on areas that we see described in the spreadsheet, for the first three, they should be looking at the dash cam footage, the mobile phone footage, and then further down, we see that the focus should be on Gallagher's CCTV footage.
Yes, that's correct.
And that's from 7:15:25, and it talks about a person in a light top and dark bottoms visibly walking towards Gallagher's pub.
Yes.
And those entries are from CCTV.
Yes.
So the phase one, which you're about to show, look at first of all the dash cam and the mobile phone, and then the Gallagher's CCTV, if people wish to do so.
Correct.
Thank you. Right, let's play stage one, please.
In order that we can transfer you to the right person or department, you now have the following four options. Please press 1 for lost property inquiries, 2 for custody inquiries, 3 if you know the name of the person or department, or stay on the line to speak to a service advisor.
But what? Yeah.
Please, what's the address of your emergency?
Hi there. There's about a 6-foot black guy at a keyhole area shells. What was that? Sorry. Keyhole.
Sorry, a black male with a, sorry, I don't know where that a blade, you saying a sword?
At the end of his road.
What time are we in?
All right.
And what was he doing with it? Was he waving it about, or? We cover the whole of Scotland now, so we need to know what town you're in. Right, just take some details then from you.
What was it? What road?
The junction of Henry Road and Temple Hall Avenue.
Perfect, thank you. Henry Road and Temple Hall Avenue, right. So what's this black guy doing?
Police, what's the address of your emergency?
There's a black man walking along. He's on the Victoria Road. a 9-inch
Right.
mitt in his
What's he
hand.
wearing? Can you remember?
Is he Victoria Road, you see?
Yes.
He's what, sorry?
What town's that in?
Victoria.
Muscly build. What is he
In what
wearing?
direction in Victoria Road is he
He's
walking?
walking towards the hospital.
Okay, is he on the road?
What's your name, please? Yes.
Mrs.
Which
Joyce.
direction was he running into?
I've just came to the horse garage to get a petrol out of his car from.
What's your first name, Mrs. Joyce?
Yes, Joyce is her name.
What's your first name?
Henry Road.
Joyce.
What's your it was Mrs. Joyce. What's your last name?
Joyce, and I'm not being funny, that is my name.
Right, okay, can I take your name for our records, please, sir?
What's your address?
That's great. And where do you live, Harry? What's your address?
I'm actually just going to the valet to get my papers.
Okay, doing.
Right, that's grand. If you leave that with me, we'll get officers to attend,
A white
okay?
t-shirt, dark trousers,
Thanks
he's a
very
black
much.
man.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
He's no jacket in the hand, but he's carrying this thing. He hit it with his right hand.
Right, okay. Wait, I'll get that past the Facebook office. So is Victoria Road, is it quite a long road? Is it near...
Yes, but he's walking quite smart.
Towards the hospital?
Towards the hospital, we are.
Okay, wait, I'll pass it to local office. Thanks for your call, Joyce.
Thank you, bye.
Bye-bye.
He's jumping taxes. That's right. Yes. Going in the post again. Yeah, we're doing that right.
Horse are not what you want to see. It's photographic evidence and these stuff. Where's it there?
It's in front of the van. I see him. I'll put on the phone.
We might turn around soon. There's a car behind us now.
Go that way.
Turn round now. Now. Just turn around that wee bit there, right? I think it's your dash cam will get as well. Anyway, that's fine. Just in peace.
Go that way.
Oh, shit.
Right.
And as we approach 7:15:25, which we see on the spreadsheet, we'll be coming up to another sighting, and this should be from the CCTV,
The Gallagher's Pub CCTV.
the Gallagher's Pub CCTV. So again, if people can focus their attention on that area.
Emergency service.
Please.
Do you need fire, police, and ambulance?
Police.
The police, thank you.
Thank you.
You are now connected to the Police Scotland 399.
Police, what's the address of your emergency?
I'm not actually too sure what the address is. There's a guy in the middle of the street with a knife in his hand.
And this is combined with the reconstruction tile
That is
showing the location of the person moving.
Yes.
Police, what's the address of the emergency?
I did phone a second ago. There's a black man, white t-shirt, black trousers. He's already come on, between Henry Road and the hospital.
You've already phoned, you said, yeah?
Aye, well, he's there, he's jumping in, he's trying to hit other cars. He's jumping so I didn't know what's wrong with him.
What was your name, please?
So for 1 Charlie. Right. I need you.
And before we leave this first phase, could I ask you, Miss Wildgoose, to go back to 7:13:15? Mr. De Giovanni, you mentioned earlier when we went through the slideshow that you had, as part of the process of the work you completed, you'd cross-checked things with Harry Kohlberg's car.
Correct.
Are we able to see that in this footage?
Yes, so if you look at the Gallagher's pub CCTV, just below the R of Gallagher, if you follow that down onto Henry Road, you can just make out some red dots, and that's
Is that Hayfield Road?
Hayfield Road.
No, that's fine.
And that's the brake lights of the vehicle that we see in the dash cam footage.
And that's what you referred to earlier in your slide?
Correct.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to the second phase, please. And this will run from 7:16:22 to 7:20:12. So 7:16:22, which you will see the timing of audio timings in the spreadsheet on page 1, to 7:20:12, which is on page 3 of the spreadsheet. And as we go through this, we'll hear a number of airwaves messages from the area control room. And we will also see, if we look on page 1 of the spreadsheet, you'll see a reference at 7:16:28 to on the CCTV from Gallagher's pub, person who's walked up Hayfield Road but is still visible on the CCTV. Thank you.
4-1 Charlie. Right. I need you to divert to Henry Road, a disturbance ongoing, male armed with a knife. African looking male chasing someone that may be carrying a knife. Described as big with muscles, about 6 feet tall, wearing a white t-shirt and dark coloured jeans. There's another job coming in, about standby. Yeah, well, that's another grade 1 call coming in for the Victoria Road, Kirkcaldy, male armed with a knife. Male in possession of a large knife, a black male wearing white t-shirt and jacket, walking along the street with a large knife in his right hand, about a 9-inch blade.
Control for 411, all units defend that, bear in mind officer safety. Was there an ARV and a dog as well, please?
Control from 4-1 Alpha. Go ahead.
And he's outside Gallagher's pub. What's your name?
We're heading there. That's 2 separate locuses. We'll go to Victoria Road before Henry Road. The alarm call can be monitored by Romeo Victor.
Right, okay then, thank you.
Roger.
Alpha Whiskey 101 and 104 also taken then.
Alpha Control from 4-1 Alpha. Can we try to get house numbers of the 2 informants, please? Roger, 1 is... The second caller is from That's a further call advising the male is in Hayfield Road near to Gallagher's pub.
Roger, that's the same. Just make a bit more sense. I think the Victoria Road call, Lucas, is probably incorrect.
Control from 401. Is there any update of ARV or dog units over?
I believe a dog unit is en route.
From overview, we're organising an ARV as well. Stand by.
Papa Control from 41 Alpha.
Go ahead.
Victoria Road probably mistaken Lucas, Hayfield Road.
Roger, Hayfield Road. That was the last place he was seen, near Gallagher's pub.
Sure, that's us approaching Lucas.
And that's another call saying he was seen walking in the direction of the hospital in the middle of the road.
Yes, yes. That's on Hayfield Road heading in that direction.
And if we can stop it there, I'd like to move on to phase 3. And this will begin at 7:20:13, and you've just stopped the second before that. And it will carry on to 7:21:38. So that's 7:20:13 to 7:21:38. And this will cover the period of time from, you will see on the spreadsheet at 7:20:13, there is an airwaves call from Inspector Stewart in the area control room, which is transcribed in the middle column of the spreadsheet. And the description comes from Gallagher's CCTV. And as we look at this screen, we will see events from Gallagher's CCTV, which will be also reconstructed in the tile at the top of this screen in the middle. And we will see that the first entry in the spreadsheet says large marked police vehicle arrives from the south, turning into Hayfield Road. And then 2 lines down, police van stops on Hayfield Road within field of vision and shown on the CCTV. And that moment the vehicle stops, first vehicle, at 7:20:23. And this phase, this third phase of footage, will end at 7:21:38, which we can also identify on the spreadsheet, which is on page 5 of the spreadsheet. And you'll see the first entry, where we're going to end this footage, indicates male secure on the ground. And again, during this, we can see other vehicles described as arriving on the spreadsheet at 7:20:30. And that second vehicle stopping at 7:20:39 on the spreadsheet. And then there is an emergency status button turned on at 7:20:42. And then from 7:20:52, we see a series of events depicted in the CCTV. And there appears during this period of time 2 visible falls. So people have fallen or landed on the ground. A further emergency button on at 7:21:19. And then some other movement, which I'll come back to at 7:21:21 of an observer. And as I've said, 7:21:38 at the top of page 5 of the spreadsheet is an airwaves message from PC Smith indicating male secure on the ground. So this will be a This will be the third phase of the footage, and I'd like you to play that now.
To Stuart here, control room to the set attending. I'm monitoring this obviously from an ARV perspective. If you get sightings of the male, you need to make an initial assessment yourself and feedback to me straight away, and I'll listen out on the channel.
Control to Bravo, do we have a description? I missed it. It's described as male, black, well-built, 6 foot tall, wearing a white t-shirt, dark coloured jeans and carrying a very large knife.
Monday 4, control kick off, that's somebody activated the emergency button.
Officer Van Jordan, easy shot, male. Control acknowledge, officer injured.
What's the locate?
We just got blue lights stopped, Jason Tagala could refer to.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that's the complete phase 3. I would like you to go back, if you may, to 7:21 and 21 seconds. So we've seen the CCTV footage, the reconstruction, and I'd now like to go back to 7:21 and 21 seconds. And if we rely on the description on the spreadsheet, you will see that there is an airwaves message from Ashley Tomlinson at that time, but in addition, it indicates movement of a possible person can be observed from the residential properties on Hayfield Road. And I'd like to go back and look at this in case anyone missed it when they were looking at the CCTV. Can you point out, Mr. Di Giovanni, where people should look if they wish to see this part that's described in the spreadsheet? So this is at 7:21 and 21 seconds, which is the real time we have on the screen at the moment.
So if you look at this area here,
Yes.
so what you're going to see is what appears to be the top half of a person moving from the house across to the street. You'll also be able to see it in the reconstruction as a blue cylinder walking along that path.
Thank you. Now I'd like to show this part of the footage again, and if possible, could we remove those red circles so that people can see the full image? Thank you. Perfect.
Thank you.
And do we see that, sorry, I'll ask you to pause it there. The blue circle disappears in the reconstruction tile when the moving image disappears behind a tree on the CCTV image.
That is correct. It's no longer observable.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We will move on to phase 4, please. And this will run from 7:21 and 38 seconds to 7:25 and 17 seconds. So 7:21 and 38 seconds, which is on page 5 of the spreadsheet, to 7:25 and 17 seconds, which you will see on page 7 of the spreadsheet. So we're moving between pages 5 and 7. And you will see that on page 7, we're ending at 7:25:17, where an airwaves call is transcribed from PC Smith, indicating the male appears to be unconscious, breathing, not responsive, get an ambulance for him. So phase 4 covers the period up to the point that a request is made for an ambulance. And can I also ask you to look at the spreadsheet on page 5 at 7:22 and 18 seconds, next to a description of what we can see in the Snapchat footage, which says a person in a grey t-shirt can be seen standing in the front garden near the entrance of one of the residential properties on Hayfield Road. So as we look through the footage at 7:22:18, we will see the Snapchat coming onto the screen, and we should see a person in a grey t-shirt. Thank you.
Control Bravo, one officer's been punched in the back of the head, no obvious serious injuries, male secure on the ground.
30 seconds out, 4-1.
It's Marshall. If you're alive, go ahead and give me an update, please.
Papa Whiskey 101, I'll just approach, I'll give you an update.
Update, Bill! I'm just still struggling.
Control. Control from 411.
We've got one fax message here and therefore I'm sure control that then.
God, the nails on the ground at the moment. We've got several officers have taken a big restraint. We'll get back to you. However, we're going to need more control with light restraints, etc. But down on the ground, well, there's no risk at the moment.
Yes, yes, can I get an update on an injury?
From 401, piece of shot's been shot to the head. It's a bit upset. I'm going to need a ambulance here, check her over. No bleeding, no visible injury.
Yes, yes, just continually to stay safe and keep full control. Use all restraints necessary. Control, could you get an ambulance please for a PC shot?
Roger. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm on route from Edinburgh. I think this is the same mail tonight, yeah?
Yes, yes.
Control from 411.
Go ahead.
Although there's no visible injuries to a piece of shot, he's been stumped the body a few times, etc. And stuck to the head. We'll see the ambulance can attend the SAP.
Yeah, we're getting an ambulance now. You know, so the locus, can you just confirm what the actual locus is?
Hayfield Road, junction with Henry Road.
Control 4-1 Bravo. Go ahead.
Can you play the next second, please, so that we can hear the end of the next airwave?
Roger, this male officer appears to be unconscious, breathing, not responsive. The ambulance for him.
Thank you. So that actually finishes at 7:25:24 we see on the screen. Could I ask you briefly to go back, in case anybody missed it, to the, sorry, it's on page 5 of the spreadsheet. 722.18. Page 5 of the spreadsheet, 722.18. And again, Mr. De Giovanni, would you be able to circle in red where we see this area that's described in the spreadsheet? A person in a grey t-shirt to be seen standing in the front garden near the entrance of the residential property.
Pause. Okay. So just here you can see a grey top and dark trousers. I think as the camera will pan around, you'll see a little bit more of him. But that's the location of where we can see that person.
Thank you. And could we remove that red circle while we watch this Snapchat footage now, please? Thank you. Right. So that's the person that's described in the spreadsheet.
Correct.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to the 5th phase. Which is between 7:25 and 25 seconds, which is on page 7 of the spreadsheet, and 7:34:08, which is when the ambulance arrives. This ends on page 13 of the spreadsheet, 7:34:08, by which time the ambulance has arrived. There's only 2 things that I'd like to point out in the spreadsheet. During this, the 5th phase, 7:27:54, a light-coloured vehicle approaches, and a person near the grassy area stops, approaching Hayfield Road, and pauses. And there's a reference here to Gallagher's CCTV, but we also see the reconstruction tile indicating where this person is. I wondered if we could move to 7:27:54 rather than playing this entire section. Would that be possible? I'm conscious of the time.
Yes, just skip through. Go from about 45 or something. Let's just get close to before. That's it, go from there.
So at the bottom of the page we have the CCTV footage, and at the top we have the reconstruction, and we can see a blue dot.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I noticed on the call card it's got Seafield Road. It's actually Hayfield Road, H-A-Y, Hayfield.
Hayfield Road.
Yes, Hotel Alpha Yankee.
And if we could pause there for a moment just to draw to people's attention, there's a person on the CCTV footage standing at the roundabout. Could you highlight that for us, please?
The upper end of it,
the CCTV, if possible.
Are you talking about the one on the roundabout or the one?
The one on the roundabout, first of all. And show us the blue dot on the reconstruction, where that's recreated. And then show us the other person. You may need to move that red circle slightly on the reconstruction.
So, and the reconstruction there.
Yeah.
There we go.
Right.
Oh. Just a little bit. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yes. So 2 people visible on the CCTV, and they're indicated by blue dots on the reconstruction tile.
Yeah.
Thank you. Could we perhaps fast forward to 7:33:35? We're still within phase 5, but I'm taking this short. So 733.35 on page 13 of the spreadsheet. It's the second row. And the description given from Gallagher's CCTV is of the ambulance arriving during phase 5. And we will also see this, as you showed demonstrated earlier, the yellow block. Thank you. The yellow block on the reconstruction tile. Let's watch that, please. Thank you. Can we pause it there, please? And that's the yellow block is on the reconstruction. We
Correct.
can all see that. And at the bottom, we saw a vehicle arriving on the CCTV.
Yes.
Thank you. And then if we could play just the next few seconds, we will hear an airwave that's transcribed on page 13 of the spreadsheet, which should say ambulance at locus.
Sector K from Robson.
Right.
I'm just going to attend to you. Obviously, I'm going to initiate locus detection measures in an actual boundary to the junction, but with some coordination of traffic management, etc.
Ambulance at locus.
Thank you very much. Then we're moving on to the 6th phase, which begins on page 13 of the spreadsheet. This is from 734.08 to 738.13. And this 6th phase ends, it begins on page 13 and ends on 734.08 to 734.08 to 738.13, and 738.13 is on page 14. Thank you. 738.14, and that ends with an airwaves message which we will hear saying male on stretcher. He's being taken to the hospital. So that's page 14 at 7:37:56. There's an airwaves message from Samantha Davidson that's transcribed, and it says male on the stretcher, remains in cardiac arrest, and then it mentions the ambulance. Could we listen to that, please? Thank you.
Control, Roger.
Perhaps we could fast forward, actually, Miss Weld goes to 7:37:56, which is the Samantha Davidson airwaves.
Go ahead.
So the last demonstration is the go to hospital remains in cardiac arrest. For your information, I'm allocating BC Connell to go with them in the ambulance. I'll get further CID resources from Gun Office in the near future.
Thank you. That's the end of phase 6. And then phase 7 from 7:38:16, which is on page 14 of the spreadsheet, to the end of the spreadsheet. And we see at 7:43:36, the end of the spreadsheet and the transcription, by which time the second ambulance has been cancelled, and we see that transcribed in that 7th phase. I don't intend to invite you to play that. Thank you very much, Ms Wildgoose. So, thank you very much, Mr. Giovanni. That's the entire footage and the spreadsheet which can be used to interpret that footage.
That's correct.
If people wish to do so. And is there anything else that I've not covered today that you feel we should discuss now?
I think it's just to state that when we initially, if you remember the original plan, this was never designed to be an end product. What happened was, as we presented to the inquiry as part of our work, they realised the value of it, and they felt the value to all of you people watching would be significant. And that's from that point on, we developed it into what it was, or what it is, and this became really a joint product between us and the inquiry. And as I said previously, and it's just our interpretation of what we've seen, but we've tried to keep it as faithful to what we can see in the CCTV and the video as we can.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Graham. I'm now addressing the legal representatives. No written applications under Rule 9 were submitted in respect to this witness. The witness will be returning, and he's indicated that he's preparing a report. So it may be that in the future, legal representatives may wish to make suggestions as to lines of questioning or make Rule 9 applications. Against that background, does anybody wish to make an application at this stage? No, that's very helpful, thank you. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Di Giovanni. That's been very helpful to the inquiry, and we look forward to seeing you again in due course. Inquiry will now adjourn until tomorrow at 10 a.m.